Good evening, everyone. I'm Minoti Rawat, Urban Transport Planner associated with Institute of Urban Transport India. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the 13th Urban Mobility India Conference 2020. This session is on Framework for Transitioning to Electric Buses. The session would be as follows. There would be a brief remark by our moderator, followed by presentation by the distinguished speakers. I request all the speakers to present their presentation within the time limit of 10 minutes as it is a time-bound session. The moderator shall intimate the speakers 2 minutes prior to the closure time. All the panelists are requested to put your mic on mute. You may unmute your mic when you are required to speak. All the attendees of this session are requested to raise their question for the panelists through chat box to all panelists. The moderator of the session is Sri Laghu Prasher. He is a Deputy Project Director of Smart SUT project in GIZ, India since March 2019. He is a transportation planner and having more than 16 years of experience in planning, designing and implementation of public transportation projects. He has been a key member of team delivering various sustainable transport projects, including BRTs Amritsar and Jaipur, and led a team responsible for successful run of city bus operation on PPP from concept till implementation stage. He has been instrumental in drafting Urban Bus Specification UBS2 and other model documents for Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. He is also an honorary secretary of Institute of Urban Transport India and active as a visiting faculty and jury member in leading planning institutes, that is SPA Delhi and CEPT Ahmedabad. I would now hand over the session to the moderator and I would request him to invite the presenters for the session.
Good evening. I welcome you, speakers and the participants who all are joining from the very heart of the country and the world probably, and to the session, breakout session on framework of transition of electric buses. And this is the first ever virtual UMI we are attending actually, and we all know the reason behind that. So without losing the much time, we have 5 speakers today, including me, and very diverse speakers sessions are here. And with this, I will directly switch on to my first speaker, Ms. Shikha, and with her introduction, I will request her. So Ms. Shikha is an IS officer of the 2004 batch and is currently posted as a Managing Director of BMTC, Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Corporation, and to best of my understanding, biggest urban bus service in India and probably in the Asia. She is also placed in additional charge as a Managing Director of Karnataka Urban Infrastructure Development and Finance Corporation. In earlier terms, she has served as a Deputy Commissioner of Mysore, Commissioner of Social Welfare Department of Karnataka, Director of Department of Pre-University Education Bangalore, and as a Managing Director of Bangalore Electricity Supply Company Limited. So as we know, it is one of the largest urban bus system in India and a big responsibility, and they have been doing a lot of innovations in bus transportation since decades, including be it commercialization of the land value capturing side or be the ITS system. And I'm sure today she will be able to give us some good takeaways from this session. So with this, I would like to invite Ms. Shikha in this session. Over to you.
Good evening, Shikha here. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
If you could, to kind of presentation.
Minoti?
Yes, just doing that.
So meanwhile, I will just give you a brief introduction of Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Corporation. BMTC is one of the largest urban fleet operator in India we are holding a fleet of 6,563 buses, which includes around 600 odd AC Volvo buses. And our network covers around 90% of residential area and 82% of jobs in Bengaluru within 250-meter access distance. So this is just to show that what kind of accessibility the commuters have to BMTC buses. And our pre-COVID ridership and service efficiency was one of the best in India. We were carrying around 35 to 40 lakh passengers. And we have also pioneered in several innovations. This year itself, we have launched lane. Just before COVID, we had launched this. This is a 22 plus 22 two-way 44-kilometer stretch in one of the most densely populated areas of Bangalore. And we also have ITS, our intelligent transport system. Since last 4 years, we have been operating on ITS. We also have something called TTMC, that is Traffic and Transport Management Centers. These are big complexes where we have bus stands, bus stations in the ground floor and other commercial institutes located in the upper floors. And we are also having a Volvo AC bus service, and it is one of our premier services, and it's quite popular, especially on the airport routes. And BMTC has consistently been making efforts to induct electric buses, and but unfortunately it has not yet been successful. Our efforts started as back in 2014 itself, when we did a successful pilot for 3 months. And then we had floated a tender, and later we had also floated a tender for 80 e-buses in FAME 1, and then in 2019 another 300 buses were sanctioned to us under FAME 2, and again we had floated the tender. But there were certain issues which I would like to discuss in detail, due to which our efforts to induct electric buses have not been successful so far. And these issues we have also brought to notice of DHI. So the key barriers to e-bus deployment is, one, very high cost. Currently, the CPKM, or the cost of running per kilometer for BMTC buses in case of non-AC buses, is around 60 to 65 rupees, and whereas in case of Volvo it is around 80 to 85 rupees. But when we compare it with the rates which we are getting in electric buses, it is quite high. And in spite of the subsidy which was given in FAME 2, the rate we discovered in our last tender of 300 electric buses was quite huge. So like all the other remaining STUs all over the country, even BMTC is not doing financially very well lately because of the various urban traffic problems. There's huge traffic congestions on our roads. There are 80 lakh private vehicles which ply in Bangalore, and we have to compete with them. And that being the case, we could not afford such a high kind of GCC which was quoted by various vendors. And that was one of the main reasons why we could not go ahead with this tender. The viability gap funding also was remarkably huge when compared to the diesel buses. So if you could see that BMTC's viability gap per kilometer will be around 18 rupees to 23 rupees for e-buses, which is almost twice as high as normal our other diesel buses. And then coming to barriers which we face, is another barrier which we are facing is vehicle technology. First we faced a challenge with identifying the vehicle specifications that could meet the BMTC's operating conditions. So deploying of e-buses through GCC require long-term planning also, and there's quite a new kind of phenomena for BMTC. First, we have to decide whether our requirement of whether electric buses we should go for AC buses or non-AC buses. Should it be a short range versus long range batteries? These all needs had to be identified, and then we also had to finalize the depots in which we want to convert the existing depots to electric depots, and also the routes with least total cost of ownership model also had to be selected. But this stage we have almost, after a lot of the discussion, after having certain pilot runs, we were able to finalize all these. So this challenge more or less BMTC was able to overcome. Next was identifying the right technical specs for BMTC operating conditions. This was also a challenge because we lacked the expertise in e-buses. and but with inputs from various non-profit organizations like UITP and international tours, we could also identify the various technical and functional specs with the least TCO. And the best TCO scenario isn't very much attractive to bidders, because we have been having pre-bid meetings with them, discussions with them. So they also express various constraints in our least TCO scenario. And again, there's lack of vehicle models to meet our specs is also one of the major constraints for us. So OEMs need to develop more long-range bus models to meet operating needs, and potential for opportunity charging is also limited. Another barriers which we faced in FAME 2 procurement rules was mandatory transition to GCC model. So as you know, in FAME 1, we had the option of either CAPEX or OPEX, but here in FAME 2, it is limited to GCC model. And here there would be issues because the high cost of financing. In case of BMTC, if BMTC tries to raise capital, we get it at a very competitive and lesser rates compared to finance, to private organizations trying to raise finance. So that obviously GCC model leads to heavy, more operating cost, which is front loaded in the various tenders which we have been seeing. And the model concessional agreements by Niti Aayog is also, it has helped to some extent to understand the key aspects of e-bus procurement, but there are certain clauses which don't meet BMTC's need, like the payment frequency timeline being 15 days, then security deposit needs, and the termination clauses also were quite stringent, and also the force majeure clause, so which would have been attracted in case of this COVID epidemic. So these are certain other barriers which we faced. And then finally, there were COVID-induced challenges. So BMTC is currently operating around 80% of its fleet, but the number of commuters has drastically reduced from 35 lakh to just 15-16 lakhs. So there has been a drastic reduction in number of passengers with BMTC, and people have moved away from public transport. And I think that kind of scenario is going to continue in days to come. And also our earning per kilometer has also reduced substantially. Earlier it used to be more than 50 rupees, and now it is around 23 to 25 rupees. There has also been a supply chain disruption due to new Government of India guidelines which restrict procurement from countries sharing land boundary with India. And as long as those issues are not resolved, in the tenders to come, we'll also face a lot of delays. So that also needs to be resolved immediately. And so there are some enablers which BMTC would like to propose to enable and accelerate e-bus procurement. One is clear the existing regulatory roadblocks for e-component supplies from neighboring countries, and then also looking at the frequent high GCC which is being quoted. We would also request the government to allow the similar higher subsidy which was there in FAME 1, so that the GCC component can come down and the project will be more sustainable for the STOs. And also to make low cost financing available, so that the STUs themselves are able to raise some kind of financing in undergoing this new technology. And some new models can also be explored. And obviously there would huge gap in capacity building which is needed, so that the existing staff which is very well trained in diesel buses is not all that well trained in electric buses. So these are some of the issues which BMTC has faced, and I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. I think you completed well before time. Thanks a lot for that. So yeah, thanks for giving us the entire storyline, what happened in the BMTC as far as electric buses are concerned. And so before I go session, my apologies, I forgot to introduce my co-moderator, Mr. Raut Bagadia, who is the MD P Manifold, and report chair of the session, Dr. Bhaskar from the School of Planning Architecture. So they are co-moderator and the report chair of this session. Yeah, coming back to the question, ma'am. Yeah. So in this country, whenever any bus transport is being planned or is being trying to improve, so as far as my experience is concerned, more than 15 years, we look up to BMTC as a best practice when it comes on operation characteristic, financial characteristic, or the innovative practices which BMTC have been doing since long decades. So, looking at your position, you have multiple failures, okay, in terms of hiring the electric buses. If you want to convey to the other cities one or two learning out of your experience, what would that be?
I would not call it failures in implementation. Maybe or BMTC was not electric bus ready, and the major concern for all the STUs is still the finances, because all the STUs countrywide are loss making today, especially the urban transport. Like it could be BEST, or it could be DTC, or it is BMTC. All the urban transport corporations are facing huge losses. So that being the case, the crucial component here is whether the STU is electric bus ready or not. It will not be a sustainable project if the difference between the cost and earning is quite high compared to the diesel buses. That was one of the main reasons why we could not succeed. So this time, what has happened? The state government has also come forward with subsidy, and now we are hoping the tender would be successful because the subsidy amount is quite substantial now. We have tried to introduce a new innovative subsidy scheme where we are taking the FAME 2 subsidy and the state government subsidy and clubbing the two, and the subsidy amount is quite substantial now, and we are hoping for a lesser GCC kind of model. So these are some of the important points. One has to first of all take care of the finances, and second most important aspect would be that kind of charging technology and the range of battery one has to go for, because there are various projects that are going on. We have visited Pune, we have visited Kolkata. These were some of the successful electric bus where it was successfully inducted. So range also now that those were inducted around 3-4 years back. Now the new range kind of new batteries have also come. So also has to take a call between what kind of range they would require, because again the charging infrastructure, the charging and environment which one has to create also will be responsibility of the STU and the DISCOM put together. So these are 2-3 key points which one has to analyze, and we have experimented enough, and I think it is high time we start inducting these buses.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ma'am. I still have 1 minute to ask you something. Okay. In your presentation, you talked about the constraint of GCC and which is mandatory in the FAME 2. Given opportunity, what would you like to suggest at a national level, considering the uptake of electric buses so far is less than 50%, okay, in India, and as against the target, okay. So, what would you like to suggest that so that this uptake can be enhanced, considering change suggest okay, doing these things probably that could have.
I feel that the STU should be allowed to take this decision, and that should be a kind of system where they are allowed to take the call. Because if currently what we see in our previous 3 tenders, our experience is in the rates quoted by the finance rate is shown as 12%. Like basically, this is the finance which they are rate equity are raising loan from various financial institutes, whereas the loan can be raised by a state unit at as low as 6 or to 6.5%. So we could save some money there. Second would be sort of union issues also. We have a strength of around 33,000 employees working for BMTC. So if we go for a lease kind of model, these people, our staff also feel kind of insecure, and the opportunity for them to fund is also substantially reduced. This is the second issue. So there should be a suitable mix of both capex and opex. Why we go for a GCC, the reason supporting lease model is that STUs do not have the inherent know-how of this new technology. So when I try to do something new, it is always better to go for lease model. So there are pros and cons in both the methods. So there should be ideally a mix of both the kind of models, which the STU should be allowed to select and experiment, and then so that they can arrive at the final model. So that is something which we feel strongly.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Point taken, ma'am. I think, yeah, you are right. The probably more flexibility and innovation should be left at the table, utilizing that money and subsidy which is required. Uh, Rahul, if you have any question, otherwise, can we switch to the next speaker?
Sure, Lagu.
Yeah.
We can move on to the next speaker.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
talking about, thank you very much, ma'am. We will come back to you, the participant present question. Okay, talking about the next speaker. So our next speaker is Mr. Rahul Bagdia. So let me have a brief introduction of him. Mr. Rahul is the managing director and co-founder of eManifold, a strategic research and consulting company, helping industries and organizations innovate and transform their solution services and business models for higher customer experience and market growth. Rahul has dual master degree, mechanical and electrical engineering from University of Michigan. He has led various clean mobility and sustainable programs funded by international agencies like UNEP, GIZ, JEF, SARC Energy Center, supporting policy and technical standard development for electric vehicles for various countries. He is Secretary of India Utility Knowledge and Network and Nagpur Smart City Council. So with this brief introduction, I will request Rahul, please proceed with your presentation.
Sure. Thank you very much, Lagu. I think I really like when Shikha ma'am talked about their efforts in undertaking a good amount of systematic planning. I agree with her that it's not failure, it's basically a good amount of learning and then really knowing the new beast, which is electric bus, and then picking it up. I will focus here with my experience around e-buses, around how to go for systematic planning and what the lack of the systematic planning is causing the challenges in the system. So let's quickly look into some of the real tangible challenges which are faced by the STUs. I am assuming that the procurement has happened. So whatever, like with lack of systematic planning, some procurements have happened. And when they go into the setup and operations part, then they face struggles. So in setup and commissioning part, we have seen that there is lack of space for e-buses to even move in and move out. There is lack of space for chargers, and a good amount of chargers actually remain uninstalled. Then there is a lack of required electric connections and grid support to the chargers, and that leads to almost more than a year delay in some of the STUs. There is still a confusion around electricity tariff for EVs, though it is notified by some of the states, but getting that tariff by the STU remains a challenge. And all these setup issues delays the start of the project. And then when you enter into the operations, we see that you actually land up into unplanned state of charge SOC depletion. And there is high range deviation than stated specs. So just to quote you some numbers, where the bus is expected to give some 150 kilometers range, you actually are seeing in practical reality almost half of it, like 80 kilometers. And that's where all the problem starts with trip losses, ad hoc changes in the schedules, unmet SLAs, and then because these are GCC contracts, lot of things are getting pushed on to the operators on the penalty side. And because of the missing data points, one of the gap area I would significantly say is like we are not real time capturing the data while the e-buses are driving and while we are charging them at the charging stations. These 2 points, just capturing some very basic data can allow us going deep dive into doing some good diagnostics. And all these things at the end of the day leads to the low e-bus utilization. Like while you expect some 200 kilometers equivalent per day run by e-buses, you are seeing that it remains like 100, 120, 80 in many of the cases. So as Shikha ma'am was pointing, this hard and costly asset remains unutilized, and actually your actual TCO, not what you get on paper, but the real ones based upon your experience, will come up much higher than planned thing. And all this then leads to the contract risks. So while all these on-ground challenges are happening, let's understand like what is the basic thing and where is it coming from. Let's look into an example. This is an e-bus with a 322 kilowatt hour battery pack. And when you remove the 20% minimum SOC requirement of battery reserve, then this is 257 usable and effective capacity now that is available for operations. And when you are running an AC bus, assuming half occupancy, this actually converts into giving you 200 kilometers range, right? So you are just starting to meet the your daily requirements, minimum requirements of 200 kilometers per day, but under the condition that AC was off and you are half occupancy. But when you now turn on the AC and continue with half occupancy, you see that your electric bus range falls down by 21%. Now it is almost 158 kilometers. And now when you actually see in running conditions, ma'am would agree, that there is a quite high overloading on the buses. So instead of like 70 or 80 normal sitting and standing capacity, this is almost 1.5, 2 times which the buses carry. And with that AC on and overloading, you see that from the estimated 200, you have fallen down by almost 40%, right? And think about it, we know this is a known issue that battery degrades over the life of the e-buses and it varies across different chemistries. But even on a conservative case, if I kind of run this 119 kilometer range for a 10 years forward battery situation, then this 119 actually drops by almost some 8 to 9%, and it is 107 kilometers of range. So now sitting in time zero, you actually know that your 322 kilowatt hour of battery pack, which is quite sizable and big battery pack by various standards, in your 10th year will actually be giving you only 107 kilometers of range, right? And today when you are operating it in AC on and overloading conditions, then it is giving you close to 120 kilometers of range. So you already know. So if you do your right range and energy estimations across the route, so this data we have generated and modeled using one route data. I am aware that with UITP, BMTC have done quite a bit and good analysis across different routes. And suddenly those same things. So now when you repeat this energy consumption for different routes, so this was an average route with, I would say like a trip distance, round trip distance of some 20 kilometers. And if it is the expected daily utilization is 215 kilometers, then with AC on off, you already see that it is coming short and you would need opportunity charging if you want to kind of achieve the full utilization that you expect. And any mismatch here is causing disturbance, is leading your higher TCO, which I think is the worries now which the operators have started understanding. I think as India, even in the OEMs, a lot of learning has come in last 1 year, 2 years. Unfortunately, lot of data is kind of being shared transparently for effective diagnosis and intervention. So I do hope that future tenders actually start seeing real-time monitoring inside the buses and at charging systems. Now for this range, if you go for shorter range of 8 or 10 kilometers trip, which are very possible in cities, congested cities like Bangalore, there because of driver enough aggression, frequent braking, high congestions, the efficiency that you get is lower than what you get from a normal longer route. And here again, you see that the shortfall in range versus expected utilization is further low. And this is the higher case, which is a, I would say, more preferred case, which Shikha ma'am pointed that operators are looking for more longer distance routes, which give them higher kilometers, but it also gives them higher efficiency and higher margins. So that is the reason that they look for this situation. So the point that I simple want to make each route is different. And unfortunately, in the rush of subsidies that happened under FAME 2, STUs actually skipped this planning phase, this pre-feasibility phase, and used basic thumb rules. And that's where we are now seeing the effects, which I kind of pointed in the my previous slide. So I think from here, this is again the question Shikha ma'am raised, like what size of battery you want to go. Now that from the planning you already know that a 330 kilowatt hours of battery pack is also not sufficient for you to meet your daily requirements in one single charge, then you know that you need opportunity charging. Yes, there are challenges with opportunity charging, and that brings down to the question like what should be your charging strategy. If by the challenges of opportunity charging at terminal or en route, we want to do only depot charging, then we have to select the right depot and right routes where your effective daily utilization is meeting the planned range. So this is something that needs to really go into the planning part. So I talked about charging strategy. Like before even we go for the procurement, this is a multi-matrix that the STU should get little bit more comfortable and idea like what they want to do. So what does charging strategy looks like? So you have to decide you are going for AC versus DC chargers. I think there is only one company in the global make which is supporting AC charging. Otherwise, most of the trend is converging towards the DC chargers. Then second, you have to look into like, are you going to go with one depot charging only overnight? So that's the location where do you want to charge? So that's depot charging, or you want to do opportunity charging at terminal, or you can also do opportunity charging in depot if the direct mileage distances are low. On route charging for the kind of access to the grid network it requires, I think like it is challenging, but definitely not impossible if done in a planned way. And especially for BRT, I think this does provides a very good opportunity for opportunity charging. How much of charge to give in terms of time, in terms of C rate of the charger, what size and numbers of the chargers that you need to put, that's a decision that you need to take. When you want to do the charging, the tariff in off nights, off peaks during the night are lower. So that's a preferred time. So when do you want to do the charging? And how is basically all between different technology types of charging that you have to choose. So this is a, I would say, little complex matrix, and I will later discuss like what all steps it really involves in terms of arriving a right case, which, as I said, will have to be very specific for route to route, and then applied to a depot. Here I'm just using a sample, another case study of 55 electric buses. These are no air conditioning buses with 330 kilowatt hour battery pack, very similar to what we discussed in the last. And I'm assuming that they are doing only night depot charging, right? In this particular case, as from the learning from the previous slide, we have used an example where STU actually plan that, okay, my expectation is not 200 kilometers per day. There are routes where I actually need 140, 130 kilometers per day. So let me kind of do a right mapping of e-buses available technology to those routes. So here we have assumed the average distance is 140 kilometers on the route with minimum 110 and 160. So if you go for charger sharing model, so you have in this example 15 number of chargers. These are shared between those 55 buses. All 55 buses are charged overnight. Each of them take kind of 2 to 2.5 hours with 125 kilowatt charger. So this is one scenario, right? You are able to meet your SLAs provided your range or utilization expected is average 140 kilometers. Now this same case of year one, when I now extrapolate like what it will become and look like in year 10. So in year 10, what happens is like your battery degrades. So this 330 is now kind of equivalent to a 263 kilowatt hour battery pack, right? With this 263 kilowatt hour battery pack, you actually will require more number of chargers to push the similar required current into them. So this 15 number of chargers become 18. So we are not saying that you need this 18 chargers in year one when actually you don't require, but you should make a budget provision upfront that either in 5 years or 6 years, you start observing with the real-time data and augment this charges. And you should appropriately account in your TCO calculations that this kind of a incremental capex will be required to continue meeting the SLAs with the same fleet. So that's the second model. And another option is like if you want to now optimize your peak load and other options, you actually go for low wattage of chargers, but then you need more number of chargers. So here we have considered the third case where we are saying like let's put each bus to a dedicated small charger of 30 kilowatts, right? So what the advantage of it is it takes away all the manual interchange time from the buses. The buses get good 8 to 9 hours of charging at slow power, which is good for its battery life. So you increase the battery life by going with this option. In all the cases, for the kind of model, you see the same kind of electricity going into it because at the end they are covering the same distances, but the capex requirements would be different. So here I have highlighted like what is the different capital requirements for these three scenarios. So where you go for a shared charger 15, it is 3.36 crores. If you go for 15 to 18 chargers now, accounting for the aging effect, then the capex increases. And if you go for dedicated charges, then further the
Rahul,
capex is high.
Rahul, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, Lago. I need just that only. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this you see the incremental capex cost is increasing. The OPEX cost remains fairly similar because the same amount of electricity that goes in, little lower in the third case of dedicated charger because the manual cost is taken away because the buses can just be parked for the full night, not requiring any manual intervention. What this converts into the rupees per kilometer scenario, I have just projected here. And again, of course, the data is little limited and it all depends on because the distance traveled by the buses are low, and that's why your cost capex cost per kilometer is almost coming of the order of 11 to 14 rupees, and your operational cost, which is electricity cost and manual cost, is coming of the order of, I would say, 6 to 7 rupees per kilometer. So this, with the planning part involved, you are able to actually do it at the entire fleet level. So I want to kind of conclude that eBus, though the manual operations of the eBus is relatively simpler, the reliability is high, but given its battery characteristics, it has lot of multiple parameters with highly interdependency. So we need to systematically plan for the e-buses. And here on last slide, where do we start? You start with e-bus specification inputs. This can come from multiple partners. You have to go for individual routes survey and their duty cycle development. I already talked to you that how the range can fall by almost 50% just by your loading, AC loading, and route cycle dynamics. So you need to do some data logging and develop this duty cycle profiling, estimates the energy for each routes, develop the charging strategy and standardize the battery around it, and then go for your chargers and grid sizing, finally with your scheduling and operations. Once you do this planning, of course, you can do it on paper using some tools. Then you are more ready to actually do a more right TCO assessment. Otherwise, we do in thumb rule forms and all the building and other numbers and SLA deviation starts happening and we land into the problem. And this needs to be done before procurement. I am glad that BMTC has actually conducted a lot of these studies and they are more ready for the procurement. And I do hope that we see good results there. So this is all I want to say, Lagu, today. Hello, Lagu. Raghu, am I audible?
Sir Rahul,
Rahul, sorry, I got disconnected. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
no worries, Raghu.
Yeah. So, thank you very much, Rahul. And as always, your presentation, your work are full of analytics and numbers, and which helps a lot in comparing the scenario. So, if time allows me to take up only one question, if I may ask, so you talk about so many scenarios using the numbers comparison with actual operational uh, environment, basically. So, what are the key planning steps that you would say that PTAs and e-bus uh, OEMs are missing, which are causing so much of deviations? So, what are those steps we are missing actually?
The simplest thing, Lagu, they can do, because we do not have, so before procurement, most of the PTAs would not have e-buses, right? But even as I said, like your routes, right? If you capture the data of your current diesel buses running on different routes, they actually can provide you a very good understanding, like how much energy will be required in that route for that kind of a speed, velocity profile, and driver driving habits and congestion on the road. So once you have the idea of the estimation of energy required on the routes, then even before you bring e-buses, you are very sure that you require within this range with your AC on off and other duty cycle on the route. And that understanding can allow you do a much higher level of planning. So you will know that my range is going to shortfall and I will need opportunity charging. So I need to kind of account for those dead mileage for bringing the bus either into the depot, if that is the only option, or otherwise, can I plan at my terminal some of the charging points so that during the route I can add something, or actually change my overall bus schedule, be more realistic. Instead of 20 minutes headway, add a little bit bigger headway after 4 hours or during the shift of the driver, and use that for actually full charging. So I think with the chargers capacity already available, with a kind of 1 hour charging, you can actually get quite bit of meeting up your needs. So a right understanding just that each route is different and thumb rule will not work. I think that is my key message that I think will change the PTA's understanding and results from the e-bus deployment.
Okay. Thanks, Rahul. Thank you. We'll come back to you, Rahul, with the question from the participant at the end of the session. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So with this, I would like to go ahead in the session with our third speaker, Dr. Ravi Kadpalli. So Dr. Ravi is an expert, and he also works with the World Bank, and the UITP is working on a policy, planning and implementation issues concerning public transport and electric mobility. He has more than 12 years of working experience on sustainable transport projects across India and is specialized in public and paratransit systems. His recent work includes analytical support to BMTC on electric buses. He has been very much closely working with the BMTC, development of India's first bus priority lane, and securing long-term budgetary support, input to the national government effort to every Dr. Ravi Kadpalli is associated with. Dr. Ravi is completed master and integrated planning for buses and India. Dr. Ravi,
Yeah, thanks for the generous introduction, Lagu. So firstly, it's a pleasure to be speaking at the UMI, although digitally. This is one of my favorite venues to actually meet up a lot of people. Unfortunately, this year we don't have that, but I'm still glad to have the opportunity to talk here. So over the past 3 years, I think I had the opportunity of working on electric buses in India largely through my work with UITP, the International Association of Public Transport, and over the past 1 year or so with as a short-term consultant with the World Bank. So I'm going to share a few high-level high-level issues that are actually currently acting as challenges or barriers for electric bus deployment in India, and some ideas on how we can move forward on this. So the first issue is the mandate itself. For how ambitious are we in our electric bus targets? So first, if you look at the overall bus market in India, about 11% of it is public buses, which are largely through state transport undertakings and special purpose vehicles designated for bus services. And around 89 to 90% are in the private bus market. So not all of them are intercity, school buses, office transport, and then intercity private buses also. So all these together are 100%. Currently, we have around 600 electric buses in India, which were deployed under FAME 1 or through some city level efforts, and around 3,500 currently being tendered out under the FAME 2 scheme, and hopefully they'll get deployed. And in fact, because of COVID, some of these are not going ahead as well. So even if we achieve all of this, we'll only reach 0.3% of the overall bus fleet in India, whereas our government targets 30% of our bus fleet to be electrified by 2030. So not just that, the number of buses we have in India is already less than what we should ideally have. As you know, our buses have over a period of time, decade, actually, they haven't been growing with the overall travel demand increase. So if we look at the increasing bus service levels in India and then electric 30% of it, we should look at a 30,000 urban bus target next 10 years. And then across India, 750,000 buses across all market segments. So since this is a mobility conference, I'll only focus on the urban buses. So even if we meet the FAME 2 target, which is actually not on track right now, will be much lesser than the target we need to be. So the first key gap is that our ambition levels are low. So we need to increase our ambition level and then identify ways to reach there. So, and whatever ambition level we have, what is the key barrier? First thing is the cost. So it is common knowledge that electric buses are more expensive than diesel buses. So that's for sure. But if we get further details on why exactly this is the case, we analyzed some of the gross cost tenders that were finalized so far under the FAME 2 scheme. So this is not the entire cost of ownership. There is cost of conductor, contract management. These are all not part of it, but majority of the cost is covered under GCC rates. So if you look at that, what we see is the first thing is that the FAME 2 subsidy covers less than 10% of the total cost of ownership. So many cities which are going for electric buses because there is FAME 2 subsidy available, that's not the best way to approach the problem, because that's a small fraction of your overall cost. The other thing is that if you compare with an equivalent diesel bus, even today TCO is 20 to 30% higher. But when I say equivalent, many cities have gone for air-conditioned low-floor buses. But if we look at the current buses we have in our cities, mostly they are non-AC high-floor buses. In that case, so this cost is 50 to 75% higher. And not just it is higher, it also varies a lot between different cities due to a lot of factors. So what are these factors? First thing is the capital expenditure required, the bus cost, charging infrastructure cost, the battery replacement needs, power infrastructure if needed. These are all, in case of electric buses, that's the majority of the life cycle cost. Second is the staff cost, which is almost equivalent. Then cost of financing, which was spoken about earlier as well. Then also the risk premium, which varies based on how was the contract risk premium that operator associates with it. And then there are other smaller costs as well. So how to reduce this overall cost is the key challenge. And then which venues do we target is quite important. So the other thing, but in order to reduce the TCO, there are actually significant knowledge gaps. So when we talk about capacity gaps, somehow we always talk about these 10 government officers or 10 consultants who need to be sat down in a room and somebody delivers a training to build their capacity. But in case of electric buses, everybody is new to the problem. So we are all figuring out on the go. So some of the key gaps at this stage, we need to figure out. We don't have a clear solution yet, but we need to work on these problems. Is firstly the planning for the electric buses. So within the contracting authorities, city or the state transport undertakings. So most of the cities are only planning for the FAME 2 fleet. So I have an allocation of 50 buses or 300 buses. I'll only plan for deploy these. But they only look at the fleet number really. So most of the tenders actually don't give the depot list or the route list where these buses are deployed. So like Rahul mentioned earlier, there's a lot of impact based on which route you select, which depot you select. So at UITP, we have partnered with ICCT to work on this, and we realized that it can vary by 100%. So the cost, the TCO can vary by 100% depending on the depot's routes you select, power infrastructure requirement, the replacement ratio of buses on these routes. So it is quite important to actually plan in advance because you are getting into a 10-year contract. The second thing is on the procurement aspect. So like Shikha ma'am mentioned, so there is a twin transition going on. On one hand, there is the technology transition on what technology specs to give, and also the procurement specifications like bank guarantees, termination clauses, what authorities obligation versus operator's obligation, who is taking the GST. So there's a confusion also. So there's not also adequate engagement. So a lot of times the timelines, tender floating and the submission dates are quite limited. So there's not enough engagement to clarify some of these issues. So as a bidder, I would rather put in all this as a risk premium and plan for the worst scenario, which leads to your higher TCO. As shown earlier, the variability is because of that. The other key thing about implementation is that in India, it's actually a fail-safe approach of implementation more than a partnership approach. So I mean, you have to sit in just one pre-bid meeting for one of these tenders to understand that both from the authorities' point of view, they don't really trust the operator to actually deliver and operate for 10 years. So most of the clauses are planning for the worst case scenario. And even from the bidder side, they don't actually trust timely payments and things. So most of the discussion is always on the financial covenants of the tender document more than, okay, this is a new service we are delivering, so how best should we serve? So that partnership approach is lacking. So we need to address both the things. One is the long range planning, like Rahul mentioned, the route level, depot level, fleet level TCO need to be planned in advance so that you get the best rate and the least cost option. And so there is a lot of focus on standardizing procurement, which is important, of course. A lot of things are actually vaguely written because of lack of knowledge on how exactly it turns out later. But important is the partnership approach. We trust each other between the authority and the operator. The other thing is the financing barriers also. On one hand, the STUs have their own financial constraint. They have always been having, because they have always been dependent on ticket revenue, and that doesn't cover for the overall cost. And now with electric buses, there is a higher cost. So they have how do they actually ensure timely payments is a big challenge that the authorities are facing. And on the OEMs, on the operator side, firstly, even though it is a gross cost operating contract, in most cases we are seeing the vehicle manufacturers being part of the tenders just to meet the financial criteria to raise the required financing to actually deliver the services. But bus manufacturers, the reason why they have become bus manufacturers because they're interested in making buses and somebody else is supposed to operate them. But now they are being part of the operations as well. So which is actually not a happy scenario for them, and hence overall on the project also. And then the commercial banks actually are not at all financing these buses. So it's an uphill task for people to actually raise financial closure to actually get operations started also. Then there is business model options. This is something that the World Bank is working on in a lot of detail to look at alternative ways. We have traditionally had outright purchase and gross cost contract, and there are other emerging models that are seen in Latin America, like separating asset ownership and the operations. How exactly do we develop a market for that in India? Having bulk procurement at a state level across multiple STUs, something that happens already in states like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, because they have smaller STUs for which procurement happens centrally. So can we explore something like that for electric buses as well? So these are things that need to be evaluated. But for me, the key message out of this is that commercial banks need to play a more crucial role in financing the operators or the OEMs, and then cities need to pay the VGF. Actually, that's where they get the least rates when there is assured payment. Other thing is that, like I said, firstly, the impact of COVID, I think that's broadly known for everybody, but on both the sides, on the government side, I mean, first everybody is impacted, private, public, urban, intercity, all operators, everybody is impacted. So the overall timelines have been pushed ahead because of that. So the thing is, most cities are cancelling their tenders because of this reason, and only cities where they have a long-term funding outlook, they are going ahead. The other thing is from the OEM's point of view, because of the phased manufacturing program, which actually mandates that majority of the components need to be sourced within India by April 2020. If you look at the list, almost except batteries, most components need to be made in India, which is a steep transition. So which is actually likely to increase the cost of electric buses, because all the chain is set up afresh, and people will build in their upfront expenses into this. So as it is, e-buses are a bit expensive, and now it's looking like they will be more expensive in the coming future. So on one hand, the STU, and on the other hand, the costs are going to increase. So how do we navigate this is important. And the private buses, like I said, they form 90% of the market. Majority of it is intercity. But see, the first reason why FAME2 prioritized urban buses is because the vehicle models we have are more suited for urban conditions with 200 to 50 kilometers per day. But as technology evolves, it looks like the 250 to 350 kilometer range routes are also likely to become feasible, and they may reach a TCO parity also. But what does it have to do with urban mobility? Because these buses still operate between cities, and cities still need to develop some infrastructure these buses and charging them. As we all know, there is actually nothing like a private bus terminal in our city. So there are STU buses, and then the private buses are generally parked on the streets, maintained on the streets, and stuff like that. So if we have this ambition of 30% electrification, so we need to somehow find a way to cater to this market. And simultaneously, the market has taken a big hit. These are private buses operate on a really small margin, and they have been seriously impacted by COVID as well. So it looks like the timelines have been pushed back even here. So the venues for action finally. So this is a summary slide. So one is we need to improve the ambition of electrification, and in order to do that, we need to identify ways to reduce the TCO. Which to me, the three key things we need to work on are having a long range planning, because that's where you can identify the least cost path to electrification. Then the incentive should be targeted on the capex aspect, because that's 25 to 30% of the cost, overall cost. And then the financing and transparent payment mechanisms. So how to unlock this market is quite important towards TCO reduction. Then the supply chain readiness is the third thing I would like to. And finally, the knowledge gaps. Again, when I say knowledge gaps, it's not 10 training programs that need to be conducted on the topic. So as a researcher, profits, operators all should come together to identify the best way forward on this topic, which is a long mandate, I would say. So finally, I'd like to leave you with some of these future references. So just the procurement aspects, I quickly skip through them, but UITP has actually done a detailed analysis of the key gaps in the current procurement. We'll have a separate webinar on that. That in itself is a long presentation. So I'd invite you to that, and also the performance evaluation of already deployed buses. So in India, we traditionally have this always future-looking outlook, which is good about the next investment, but we never really evaluate the past investment. So particularly with the cost-intensive thing like electric buses, how exactly have they performed is quite important. So there is another report coming up on that. And also for researchers who are interested, there is a UITP Public Transport Summit happening next year. So the call for abstracts is on for now. So I invite you to participate there as well. So yeah, so that's where I'll end. Thanks, Lagu.
Thank you very much, Ravi. It's a very well summarized presentation. Really impressive to see the way you have summarized all the issues, especially including the financing, which are very much actually the issues which are STUs and operators have. Yeah. And I remember when I was speaking one of the private operators, they also mentioned this thing that it's not easy to raise the finance for the electric buses. And over and above, I think whatever the subsidy is coming under the FAME 2, the cities are asking the bank guarantee against the subsidy from the operator. And credit capacity of, I don't see many operators in this country having good credit capacity to give that kind of bank guarantee without depositing money.
The interesting thing is that the subsidy bank guarantees. Yeah, sorry. So the interesting thing is the bank guarantee is actually mandated by government of India. So all cities are asking, irrespective of whether the city needs it or not. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, but as I said, one of the operators said that out of 28 crore, if bank guarantee is being asked, so actually we are getting the subsidy of 20 crore. 8 crore bank is keeping. Okay. So that is not actually the full amount of subsidies coming. Thanks, Ravi. We'll come back to you, Ravi, on from the question answer session. Okay. I think next session is next presentation is mine. Okay.
I think I should invite Lagu now. I think I should now invite Lagu to share his presentation. Very, very important presentation. I think both Shikha and Ravi brought out the need for training and right skills development when many of the STUs are kind of looking into in-house model, more capex oriented model than opex model, and issues of union and fears, because all these are very tactical issues which actually becomes the bottleneck to new technology transition. So Lagu, over to you to share your findings on training needs assessment for electric buses in India.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. Thank you very much. This is a brief presentation about of electric buses, and it is a big study which is under process right now, and we will be ready with the outcome of the study by this month end, and it will be available for the public dissemination and the reference. So how it started that bus transport, this technology transition is not the new thing for the bus transportation, and bus transportation from decades is seeing the technology transition. Few transitions are regulatory transition, which are mandatory, like CNG, BS4, BS6, and few are non-regulatory in the okay, which are voluntary, depending on the cities and their willingness to, like intelligent transport system migrating to the rear engine buses or low floor buses. So my experience is that I work with many cities in bus transportation, and whenever there is a technology transition happen, there is a big gap between the technology which is entering into the system and the understanding of the people. They have an understanding, they are much experience for particular kind of technology. It takes time to upgrade themselves and with the new technology. Okay, but unfortunately, that sufficient time for upgrading our skill set, which are required for sustainable adoption and operation of that technology, and which sometimes leads to the failure, okay, in terms of adoption. And unfortunately, we start blaming the technology. Okay, this ITS technology is not good. Probably that vendor is not good. They are not performing the way we wanted. But fact is that sometimes that we, as a human resource, may not be ready for that technology. We were not aware about uh, the right and wrong specifications or the designing part of that particular technology. So taking cue of that, we realized that in GIZ under the Smart Institute project that this is the new in terms of e-buses happening in the bus transportation, and which is a big thing. Okay, and it is a new technology, it is a new animal, and which cities are adopting very aggressive way, I would say, and with the support of Government of India under the FAME 2 policy. And that's when we decided that let's let us support, let us plan something. What kind of human resource upskilling requirement would be there and retraining requirement would be there for sustainable adoption of the into the uh, non-STUs organization also like state FPV. So it can be irrespective of the model, whether it is outright purchase or on a PPP gross cost contract. So this was the motive behind starting this particular study. So basically, a study has got three outcomes, and one is the training need assessment part for the electric buses in public transport authorities, and second part is the training program. So the second volume of the study talks about the modules and the sub modules and what kind of the training programs, training content should be there under each and every sub modules. And third volume of the study is talking about what kind of organization structure should be, what kind of, whether you need a new human resource or you need to upgrade the existing human resource. Probably the reskilling of the existing human resource would be required for the e-buses, uh, or maybe the new induction of the new human resource would be required within the overall organization structure, existing organization structure of the STUs and the SPVs. So which is the third volume to talk about. So we started with a dividing. So sorry. Yeah. So we started basically subdivided the entire life cycle of the bus operation into the 7 functions. Started from the strategic roadmap and the planning, specification design, procurement process, bid process management including, and operations, which is the main aspect, repair and maintenance, monitoring and control, ITMS and MIS system, and last is the scrapping and the recycling. So we divided basically these 7 functions associated with the electric buses, and then further these 7 functions were sub-categorized into the 28 sub-functions. So when I talk about the strategic roadmap and planning, why do you need the e-buses? Okay, how do you decide what should be the decision points on deciding on the e-buses? Size of the technology selection, as Rahul was talking about in his presentation. How do you decide what should be the size of the battery? Okay, whether you are over purchasing or under purchasing. So how to decide on that? Then long-term strategy requirement for the e-bus transition. Is it a one-time job, or probably over a period of 10 years you would require to 100% or 30%, 50% transition the e-buses from your legacy fleet, and there will be time for a long time you have to operate both your legacy fleet as well as the electric fleet. So those considerations and manpower planning and the staffing requirement as I was talking about. Similarly, each and every these functions were divided into the sub functions, and I will not get into the each and every of these functions. So it's on a scrapping and the recycling part, that end of life cycle definition. Of how do you define that this is end of the life of the bus battery? Scrapping and disposable tracking. Okay, and considering the environment aspect and all these things. And all these sub functions were further categorized into the activities. So these functions, sub function, and the activities were consolidated into a questionnaire, a detailed questionnaire. And this questionnaire were basically used for two type of stakeholders. One is the supply side stakeholder and another is the demand side stakeholder. When I say supply side stakeholder, which includes uh, all the people around the state transport undertaking and public transport authority. So be it OEMs, battery electric bus service providers, battery providers, and infrastructure providers, experts. So all these are the supply side. And then we also uh, do the assessment on a public transport authority side, which at each and every level. So start from the top level management, senior level, and middle level till the workman level. So close to 100 response were collected, and the purpose was that to on a same question on say function and sub-function assess. We wanted to have a perception from both the demand side and the supply side, because ultimately the bus OEM and the battery service provider, they interact a lot with the public transport authority. So when they interact, how do they assess their skill sets, their understanding about those particular aspects in which I say functions into the electric buses? So before starting the study, we targeted 7 STUs, but because of COVID, we could complete 4 STUs, which include the Himachal Road Transport Corporation, Kolkata, West Bengal Transport Corporation, Navi Mumbai, and the Bangalore. And this the survey was done at all levels. Okay. Yeah. So post collection of the data, we divided the current skill sets we subdivided into high, fair, and medium and low category. And if the high is the skill level requirement, the level of training requirement will be low. Okay. So this is how we, for the purpose of depiction, we use these ranges. So on a very broader, the top level view, if you look at the procurement function, which found as a high skill level. Okay, and which is pretty much obvious that since STUs have been procuring the buses, may not be the electric buses, have been procuring the buses since long time, their perceived rating for themselves was very high as far as procurement functions were concerned. But at the same time, when we interacted with the OEMs, that rating was not that high. Okay, but overall, the procurement function is something which is the consolidated rating is high as far as overall skill levels are concerned. While at the same time, strategic roadmap and planning function has a fair level skill level, and technical specification, monitoring, and control, which are the medium skill level. So when I say medium skill level, the fair level of training needs are there. And when it comes to repair and maintenance and scraping and the recycling function, the existing skill levels are very low. So which is comes from the consolidated ranking from demand side and the supply side. So this is at the top level rating of skill levels. Yeah. So what kind of issues STOs, Public Transport Authority, could face because of this lack of skill levels? And I think my previous speakers has pretty much talked about all these things. I will not spend much of the time. So let's talk about the strategic roadmap and the planning part. Okay. So basically, we have examples like cities were procuring the electric buses, but had no idea about what kind of energy infrastructure requirement would be. And city end up spending good amount of money on the energy infrastructure requirement at the depot, which was not planned earlier into the budget planning or during the assessment of the pre-feasibility part. So this kind of lack of assessment, lack of understanding, and overall suboptimal utilization of performance because of the lack of planning, and which Rahul was talking about also in his presentation. Technical specification design. So as Rahul also spoke that what kind of battery size you would require, so which leads to the suboptimal choice of battery size. That okay, you may require your city size probably may not require 200 kilometer or 250 kilometer, and for that you are buying the 320 kilowatt or 350 kilowatt hour battery. But you need to understand if city is just requiring 150 kilometer, probably that kind of battery size may not require. So if this is kind of a, you are either overbuying or you are underbuying the battery size. And which ultimately reduced the e-bus productivity and the revenue shortfall. One of the city we found that during the peak hour, during the um, evening peak hour, electric buses were in the charging station where they were supposed to be on the road, which is eventually happened because the committed performance was not equivalent to the on-road performance, and that's what happened with one of the cities which we found. And these are the challenges which eventually we could see over various functions, and this will be eventually dealt very much detailed into the study. Similarly, when we talk about the top level understanding of the skill level requirement, and we also did the top level management and senior management roles uh, at each and every level, all these all these function and sub function, what is the level of training needs, whether it is low, medium, fair, and high. So study is also covering that aspect, that each and every level in the hierarchy of the public transport authority, under which function, what level of training need is required. Okay, probably at a workman level, the level of training requirement will be high in one function, but will be low in another function. Same is in the top level management, where the more training requirement is required at a need of e-buses, deciding the technical specification probably at a senior management level. So the study is also categorizing very comprehensively at each and every level, the level of training requirement. So when we have all this assessment done, we are currently, what we have decided are close to 8 modules and 31 sub-modules for the training part across all the hierarchy of public transport authority. And this is the second volume of the study, which I was talking about earlier. And one particular module is common across, and which is the fundamental of safety, which we wanted that safety fundamentals of the safety should be part of, at each and every level. Everybody should understand, be it a top level or at a workman level, about the safety aspect, be it a fire hazard or the standard operating provision of standard operating procedure for prevention and emergency handling. So this is the common module, and similarly each and every module is talking about the content of the training requirement and at what level that content should be. So further the training, that level of detailing has been done at a 2 level, the L1 and the L2 level. And L1 level is probably the 50% of the detailing as the L2 level. So not all level the detail training would be required. So we have subcategorized further the level of detailing depending upon the hierarchy. Probably at a senior management level, at a top level management level, a kind of a 50% of the total detail training requirement would be there, while on particular aspect at a workman level, the level of detail requirement would be much and more for that particular sub-module. And the second thing is that further the modules we have divided into the depending upon the procurement model. So there may be question like if the STUs or the public transport authority is operating on a gross cost contract, the training requirement cannot be same and cannot be equivalent to the public transport authority who's procuring the electric buses, because functions are much lesser in case of gross cost contract at the level of public transport authority. So considering this aspect, we have further subcategorized the modules and the training requirement depending upon the procurement model. Now, for delivering this training program, it will be like there will be many players which will be involved, and of course, the recipient will be of the training would be the public transport authority, and it will be housed under one of the appropriate ministry, and there will be technical partner, industry partner, and somewhere a nodal agency like ASRTU or the SIAM could play an important role at a central level, and for consolidating that kind of a knowledge. And we would require the assessment partner for such a kind of a certificate partner and the assessment of the training content, and which like a ASDC could play a better role with that. Then we will have a training content developer, which can be an institution, which can be a trainer, and of course the e-bus vehicle manufacturer will also play the important role as far as the training part is concerned. this is a brief about this training assessment study. And as I said, it is a detailed study which we have recently completed. And of course, my friend Rahul Bagdia is part of this study. His company P Manifold is very much working with in partnership with GIZ on this particular study. And we will have a detailed dissemination of this study next month. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lagu. I think it will be actually very pertinent if Shikha ma'am and also Ravi, with their experience around training and capacity building and highlighting those needs, if they can kind of comment on the requirement of such training and what are some practical ways to actually create a right structure and penetration of these trainings within the STUs and SPVs. So if Shikha ma'am can share her thoughts, and then Ravi can also add his viewpoint to it.
See, but training is a very crucial component because we are moving away from the conventional traditional diesel based model to electric based model, and many of the STUs I'm sure would have put a vision plan in place to decide their transformation into electric fleet. So now what happens is, as we know that the STU has various sections working for it. It could be mechanical section, it could be the traffic or the operational sections, and then it could be the maintenance wing. So the entire setup needs to undergo a transition and a smooth transition, because even the business model is changing here. So the kind of trust it needs to be built up. So we are used to behaving with vendors in a particular fashion, because it is normally we purchase a particular kind of item like a bus or a chassis from them, and then that's it. But here it will be a hand-holding model for 10 years, and there is a lot of trust which both the agencies should have on each other, the authority and the vendor, service provider. So that being the case, the entire outlook, not just in technical terms, even in professional and financial terms and operational terms, has to change. So in that view, the training is an important component, and also the training of just the HOD level not do. The training aspect has to trickle down to depot level and even the grassroots level. So that being the case, it's
Very
a
true,
very
ma'am.
crucial aspect which we should we should try to implement. And now that online trainings are quite popular, I think one should start doing it, whether they are procuring these buses right away or not. They can just start away with the training component at least.
Very, very pertinent, ma'am. And just a few thoughts, ma'am, like when we were on ground, understanding the senior management and even grounds team opinion around the need of training. While the skill gaps are high, but there is also a view that comes also from the top and sometimes from the bottom that, okay, it's a GCC contract, the operator has to take care of these things. STU need not have this kind of a deeper training. So how, as a senior head of a STU, you will ensure that this effort that GIZ has initiated, I think one of the unique across the world, I would say, how do you ensure that there is a good adoption in the STUs for these trainings, man, across all levels, right from the topmost MD level to, as you said, like right to the ground technicians and also driver level? How to create that acceptance, man?
See, this GCC is only one of the business models which is mentioned in FAME 2. But there are various cities which are doing it through their own resources, through some kind of state budget or state support. So given an option, there would be an option of outright purchase of these buses also. And then there would be a requirement to maintain it in-house. So it can't be said that just because it is GCC, that the entire responsibility is that of operator. Even see, even to get things done by operator, first the authority should have the knowledge, know-how of what is going on. So whether it is GCC or whether it is outright purchase model, it is very important that at all levels This has to be done. In fact, when we were trying to implement it, we had some kind of not resistance, but our sections are used to thinking and executing in a particular way. To change the tradition itself was causing lot of resistance. So that is a very crucial component which one has to look at.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Lagu, you have follow-up questions with Shikha or Ravi, or maybe then Ravi can share his viewpoints. What are some areas, very practical again, to ensure that this training takes up a right national level acceptance and participation? What kind of collaborations? I think, Ravi, you also talked about we need kind of right collaborations, right partnerships. What kind of collaborations you envisage that this training and creating this national training program around e-buses could use, like from vehicle manufacturers and from UITP and from other stakeholders?
Yeah, thanks. So firstly, I should congratulate the team for actually laying it out in such a nice detail. So you have actually pieced the big issue about knowledge gaps into all of these small components so that you can have targeted action and identify what exactly needs to be done there. So my suggestions, I have 2-3 suggestions. The first thing is that at this point, it looks like we are looking at a classroom training kind of an approach towards knowledge building. But the fact is that it doesn't exist. It's not like the knowledge exists somewhere. It's not like a bus route planning that, okay, this is how you plan bus routes. You look at travel demand, you look at this. And then so with electric buses, it's not the case. Actually, things are evolving. So how to make it? Firstly, we need to be fluid about it. As things evolve over a period of time, we need to find a way to incorporate the new learnings. Second is that we need to have a co-creation kind of approach. So particularly on electric buses, actually STUs have more knowledge than a private consultant or an external body, because they have already been through so many rounds of tenders. And so on some aspects, actually STUs know much more than others. So we need to find a way of capturing that knowledge towards, so more like a peer-to-peer learning approach, more than a classroom training approach where somebody external is typically coming to train people. So one is peer-to-peer learning. Second is being fluid with the content. The third thing I'd like to suggest is to have working groups or other approaches to actually build the capacity rather than the structured approach. So broadly, yeah, these would be what I would say. I mean, being fluid with the content, having a co-creation approach, and not sticking to just classroom training. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Ravi. Over to you, Lagu.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. I think it's exact the time 6:50. We have to wind up the session, and I think the next session will start after this break. So, with your permission, should we just close the session or what? Or you have anything?
No, sure. So I think I just want to have a concluding remark from all of you, including you, Lagu. If Shikha ma'am can talk, Shikha, you have looked into long-term planning aspect with UITP and other support. There was a good route level detailing that was done. Now you are looking for a procurement stage, hopefully clearance from local government also on neighboring country purchase. What do you
So
think
Rahul, I
is,
think ma'am has dropped off. And, sorry to interrupt, but I don't think.
oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe Ravi, because you were associated with BMTC, if you can answer this point, and you also talked about long-term strategy. What are those long-term strategy looking like for BMTC? Like, is it a year-wise clarity now that exists, like in year-wise, this many buses, and by this time we will do, or it is much more fluid at the moment, and you think it requires more inputs, some more data collection?
Yeah. So the way we approached is actually we created a 2030 vision plan for BMTC. So the thing is, it's a large investments towards electrification, right? So, and the baseline is that we have undersupply of buses. So even though BMTC is the largest, for the city's travel demand increases, BMTC also needs to increase its fleet over the next few years and then transition to electric. So what we did is over the next 10 years, we estimated the travel demand needs to estimate the overall fleet needs. And then within the overall fleet needs, what is the electric transition timeline looking like based on TCO parity. So we first did a city level assessment of overall fleet needs and the timeline for electrification. And within that, we have gone down to depot and route level detail to prioritize air-conditioned depots, non-air conditioned depots, and then the routes. So the objective is that eventually this should be good enough to be shared with a KFW or a ADB or a World Bank who is interested in overall supporting electrification of fleets, and then we use this as the baseline to inform investment needs and also the procurement and implementation needs.
Great. Great. And does it look like a 100% new e-bus purchase
Yeah, so the
by 2030?
The Karnataka EV policy states 100% target of electric buses by 2030. So from a procurement point of view, if we start procuring from 2020, so we looked at the current buses and their age and the time when they have to be scrapped. So if we look at that, and then if you look at the EV policy target of 2030, so then from 2023 onwards, BMTC should only purchase or procure electric buses to reach that target. So we looked at the policy target of the state and then worked backwards on the fleet target.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Rahul, I think we have to conclude the session.
Yes. Go ahead.
Next session will start. Okay, so with this, I would like to thank all the speakers, all the participants, and rapporteur, and all my colleagues from IoT who are supporting us for organizing this session. And thank you very much, guys, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for moderating, Lagu. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Now I would request you to join the next session, that is conclave and validatory session.